Harry is a drug-addled embarrassment who should be either locked up or shut down. And things have reached a path where his father really does need to remove him off the royal family website. And if he continues to fail to do that, he is being remiss in his duty to the British people and to the British crown.
Of Prince Harry's hairline, and I genuinely believe this, is now indicative about the ruin in his life. I mean, this was a man who had the front to say that Prince William was alarmingly bald. And as Andrew Lawrence pointed out, after seeing Harry during his UK appearances this week, effing hell, mate, Clippers, #1, all over. And as I say, it's not because I have any issues with the fact that it's very difficult for men who are going bald. Trust me, I know about that and I dealt with it. But it's about what this represents. It's about the fact that Harry doesn't see himself like the rest of the world does. Why on earth would you go around as a 40-something-year-old man with that type of hairline? You've got to do a Prince William. You've got to acknowledge where you're at in your life and get rid of it. So for me, there is something symbolic when we look at Harry as this sort of pathetic, balding man. And even the mainstream media who have tried to be positive about Prince Harry have had to admit that while he is defiant in defeat, his life's work now lies in ruin. That's the Daily Telegraph. And Lady C, Lady Colin Campbell, I want to get into what this court defeat means and how important it is really, and what a loss it is from someone like you who has actually regularly taken on the newspapers for lies and won. But first, can I just ask you about your impression of Harry this week, how he did look like a broken man, how there is something very weird about the fact that he just won't deal with his hair one way or the other. It's like he's trying to cling on to an image of him as this sort of handsome young prince when the rest of the world now sees him for who he unfortunately truly is.
Well, Dan, I actually take the view that if he wants to be natural, which he is being, he has an absolute right to be natural. I'm actually mystified that he simply doesn't go and get his hair implanted. Because, I mean...
Absolutely. You know, I've done it. It was the best thing I ever did.
Well, one of my sons has done it, who you know them both. But
very handsome, you know, he is too.
I gave one of them as a present because he was going bald. And he's very good looking and he didn't want to go bald. And but what gets me about Harry is the lack of insight. That he looks at William, who's equally bald, and says how terribly bald William is, but then that somehow it's okay because he's not bald when he's equally bald. It's a total lack of insight and the, you know, putting down his brother for situations that he shares. It shows how immature and really very stupid he is.
Well, indeed. And Lady C, that's why I think it completely fits with what happened in court this week. Because remember, he genuinely had led to believe that he was going to be the dragon slayer, that he was going to destroy the British Free Press. Now, of course, we understand, and as someone who's worked on Fleet Street, that there have been absolute outrageous crimes committed. And I am the first to say all of those people who committed those crimes should suffer for it, should lose their careers, should go to jail. But you can't make stuff up. You cannot make stuff up. And you've got to be very confident when you go into a case like this. And Lady C, you have written this week, and I want to share it with people because it's very, very fascinating. You wrote on your X about your own experiences as a dragon slayer of the British press. posting on X, as someone who has successfully sued Associated Newspapers on several occasions and has been a fierce critic of them at times, I am relieved that Mr. Justice Nicklin found for them and against the host of money-grubbing, damaged shoppers whose case they knew was founded on a fraud, yet they persisted in pursuing it nevertheless. As someone whose life has been far more unwarrantedly damaged by the lives of the Mail and other papers spread about me for some 3 decades than any of the claimants, I have scant sympathy for anyone who is so egotistical that they would try to destroy one of our largest, if not our largest, newspaper company in the country. And make no mistake about it, that was their and Hacked Off's objective. It would have been a sad day indeed for freedom of the press if Prince Harry, Elton John, David Furnish, Sadie Frost, Liz Hurley, Sir Simon Hughes and Doreen Lawrence had won. I have personal experience of Mr. Justice Nicklin as a judge. He was the judge on my action against the Daily Mirror. For 3 long years, Alison Phillips and her crew did everything in their power to run up my costs so that when they had to settle, I would suffer a financial loss. It didn't quite work out like that, but they weren't to know that. Mr. Justice Nicklin exercised great patience with them, as he did with that cabal of hacked-off, money-grubbing adventurers who hoped to get massive settlements for no good reason. He was an impressive judge, and I've said all along that although I don't make predictions, I couldn't see, with 5 decades of litigation experience, how they could win. It is therefore outrageous that Harry and Doreen Lawrence, who should be undyingly grateful to the Mail for having brought her son's murderers to justice, for make no mistake, without the Mail's campaign, Stephen Lawrence's killers would still be working free, would issue a statement accusing Nicklin of stitching them up. They had no case, they never had a case. They, or at least their lawyers on their behalf, tried to fabricate one, not out of thin air, but fraudulently. The whole lot of them is damned lucky that the matter has not yet been referred to the police for criminal investigation. Uttering false witness statements is not only fraudulent, it is an attempt to pervert the course of justice. In my opinion, the misconduct in the case has been so flagrant that it is only exceeded by the arrogance of the claimants and their legal team. They persisted in trying to shake down Associated Newspapers as they pursued a fabricated case, even after their main witness, Gavin Burrows, had sworn that the witness statement they had pegged the case upon and were alleging was his was a forgery. The brass neck of Harry and his cabal, not to mention their lawyer-in-chief, David Sherborne, is truly stupendous. Harry is always talking about accountability. I think it's about time that some, if not all of those involved in this £50 million shakedown are held to account. I agree with Paul Dacre, someone with whom I have previously crossed swords, and in fact, once sent the message that was so graphic that I couldn't possibly repeat it here. I want to know what he said. But he is right. There were clearly criminal activities involved in the matter. Mr. Justice Nicklin's judgment is a bright day for a free press in this country. For make no mistake about it, had that band of leeches had their way, either they would have walked away with huge payouts to which they had no right, my view of what they really hoped for, or then they would have destroyed Associated Newspapers, which is not only one of our major newspaper companies in possession of the world's largest internet website, but by its very existence and despite its many failings, absolutely fundamental to such freedom of expression as still remains in this country. Lady C, I thought that was an incredibly powerful statement. And what I want to pick up on with you, because it's really important, is Justice Nicklin himself, the judge. Because here you are revealing to the world that in your case versus the Daily Mirror, he was totally fair. Yet Harry has suggested that he is in some ways compromised, that there has been a whitewash because in the past he had represented the Daily Mirror. And what you're doing with your personal experience is blowing that argument up. The stories about Harry and Meghan, the establishment and the media are working overtime to suppress. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken. Subscribe right now for free if you want the truth straight.
Well, the whole thing is outrageous. I mean, you know, quite frankly, Harry is a drug-addled embarrassment who should be either locked up or shut down. And things have reached a path where his father really does need to remove him off the royal family website. And if he continues to fail to do that, he is being remiss in his duty to the British people and to the British crown. The rest of it is more complicated. But Harry has also, I am told, Harry and Meghan have been going around moaning about white privilege and that they are victims of white privilege. I mean,
you couldn't make it up.
Exactly. So now they're playing the race card as well as the class card, and they are victims of a cruel establishment because they are the underdogs. Harry and Meghan are two of the most privileged people on earth. I mean, it's about time that he really was stopped in his tracks, certainly in terms of the presentation on the royal family website. It's now inexcusable for the king to continue to have him on the website. He's taken the king's Ravek to court. He's taken he gets a judgment against him. He then complains to an elected politician to get a lawyer's and a court's judgment overturned. And now he tries to destroy the British press, which is fundamental in a democracy for the maintenance of our freedoms. And I mean, Charles really does have to do something. This is now beyond the pale that he is accusing Mr. Justice Nicklin of corruption. And he is basically saying that, well, he said it's a stitch up, and that influence was used to prevent him from winning the case, when it was obvious to me that there was no case and never was.
Well, 100%. And ladies,
cannot be brought. Sorry?
Well, I was just going to say, just to jump in, it looks like even Harry had realized that, because it has just emerged. Look at this headline. He had sought a deal with the Daily Mail before the doomed court case. But what's so fascinating about this, Lady C, and good on them, good on Paul Dacre, and like you, Lady C, as you know, I have my issues with the Daily Mail. I have my issues with Paul Dacre. The way they treated me was absolutely appalling. But
it was beyond dreadful.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, just to back you up there.
Well, no, but I totally accept in this case they have been absolutely heroic. He did totally the right thing, Paul Dacre. Absolutely. And you know what, Lady C? They should never have settled. Because what Harry wanted them to do was settle, but at the same time agree that they would never attack Harry. And that was impossible. So they risked everything. Because, Lady C, mark my words, if even just one of those 97 stories had come from illegal means, Harry would have been calling for the whole newspaper to be shut down.
Yeah. Well, this was a plan, as Paul Dacre said, but you and I have been saying it since this case began. This was hacked off trying to shut down associated newspapers.
Correct.
And Harry was the useful idiot. But Harry's behavior, and Doreen Lawrence is inexcusable as well. Doreen Lawrence should... Now, I know people who know Doreen Lawrence, and remember, I'm Jamaican. She's Jamaican, and her husband is Jamaican. And okay, we are completely different, to be blunt about it, classes of Jamaicans. And in the ordinary course of life, our paths would never have crossed. But she is not in the ordinary course of life. And she was made a pair by David Cameron, who was trying to suck up to the brown and black voters. And David Cameron is very leftist. And so he was sucking up to the left and within the Tory party and trying to get leftist Labour voters to jump ship and vote for him. and he made her a pair, and they didn't make the husband the pair. And had Neville Lawrence been made the pair, she would still have been Lady Lawrence, but by making her the pair in her own right, he is just still Mr. Neville Lawrence. And I know people who know both of them because I found out stuff about them. He absolutely hasn't. He deplores the way she has behaved. She has gone on to be a real, what they used to call Uncle Tom in America. She's right up there sucking up, and she's a very humble woman who, and I'm not decrying the fact that she's humble, by the way. And when I say humble, I mean not humble in character, I mean of humble background. And she's been made much of a deal of, and on the back of her son's murder, incidentally, and it's completely turned her head, and she's busy ingratiating herself to all sorts of lords and ladies and princes and all the rest of it. But it's all very left-wing, because as soon as she was made a pair, a conservative pair, she jumped ship to sit on the Labour benches. So, I mean, she didn't even have loyalty to the very person who elevated her to the peerage. And she certainly had no loyalty whatsoever to the Mirror.
And remember, well, I was just going to say, and remember Neville, Stephen Lawrence's husband, Stephen Lawrence's father, remains loyal to the Daily Mail. Lady C, there's another aspect of the Daily Mail case that I want to ask you about, given your own experience with Princess Diana, because of course Harry has tried to make this argument that he is doing what Diana would have wanted. But both Paul Dacre and Richard Kay this week, Richard Kay being the former royal editor of the Daily Mail who was friends with Princess Diana, have said absolutely not. Diana was actually pro the Daily Mail newspaper. I just want to play you what they said, and then I'll get your reaction. Watch this.
It'd be fair to say that the Mail effectively, not that we took sides, tried to be balanced, were more on her side than the rest of Fleet Street were when it came to that divorce.
Absolutely. I mean, I can remember the coverage of the Charles Diana divorce, which went on for many years, the War of the Waleses, we called it. And we unashamedly took Diana's side. We felt that she was more sinned against than sinning. She was a friend of the paper too. It's perfectly true that she and I had a friendship that went beyond the fact that I was merely a journalist here. We were good friends outside my work. But Kensington, where we are based in West London, was also our base when Diana was alive, and it's right across the road from Kensington Palace. We were kind of Diana's local paper in many ways, and she would often drop in to meet editors and executives. She was a frequent guest at internal private boardroom lunches, for example, or she would just come in to pick up the latest edition of the paper.
The bitter irony is that his mother, Diana, liked the Mail. We were her paper. We took her side in her acrimonious breakup with Charles. She and I would speak and meet. The Mail's superb royal reporter was her friend and confidant. The truth is that this trumped-up action, which has cost well over £50 million and wasted a huge amount of valuable court time, should never have been brought to trial.
So, Lady C, obviously you had your own interest in history with Princess Diana, given your book revealed a lot of what was going on in her life. But is the fundamental point that Richard Kay and Paul Dacre making correct, which is that Diana actually had a pretty positive relationship with the Daily Mail on the whole, and she wouldn't have wanted her son to try and bring down that newspaper, and specifically Dacre and Richard Kay, who she had a relationship with, at least a friendship with.
She was a Daily Mail girl. There are no two ways about it. Sir David English, who neither of them has mentioned, but he was a head honcho at the time. And he said about Diana that she was an absolute genius in PR. And And had she not been the Princess of Wales, he would have recommended that she set up her own PR company and head up everybody else's PR. She was a PR genius. She used the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail was, you will know, Dan, the Daily Mail is one street over from across the road from the
in High Street, Kensington, yeah.
But that's, the proximity was coincidental. It was the fact that she was able to use Richard Kay as a conduit. Paul Dacre and David English were happy to have her using them as the conduit. They took, by their own account now, they took her side in the action against Charles. And in fact, they were sometimes very unjust to Charles, as I used to point out at the time, and I'm still prepared to point out. But no matter what, whether they had been pro-Diana, anti-Diana, pro-Charles, anti-Charles. And personally, I thought they were very remiss in their coverage of the breakup of that marriage, because they bent over backwards at times to accommodate Diana.
Well, they're admitting it now, aren't they?
But they were getting information directly from Diana. And so they were keeping her sweet. So that really was a little bit unethical, because the reality is they should have been even-handed, as indeed was I. I was always very even-handed. They weren't. But none of that matters now. All that matters is that they are a reputable newspaper company. Yes, they have made mistakes. I mean, Harry talks about how they affected his life. The damage they wrought in mine is far greater than anything they could have wrought in Harry's life. And here am I defending them and saying they have a right to exist and they should exist. And anything that, because the law already, by and large, has sufficient safeguards that if you have a complaint against a newspaper, there are ways and means of remedying it. I do think that there are problems in terms of the conditional fee arrangements at the moment, which the newspapers lent on the courts to alter, and the courts altered it adversely. But putting that aside, there are already legal remedies. Harry and Meghan and Elton John and Hugh Grant and that whole cabal, they are trying to shut down a free press on both sides of the Atlantic. Harry and Meghan are. He's a member of the Aspen Institute. He is trying to shut down not only newspapers, but control social media so that they will basically be in control of what pundits and writers and authors can say. This is outrageous and it needs to be stopped. And I am not surprised by Mr. Justice Nickling. I found Mr. Justice Nickling in my action against the Daily Mirror to be extremely fair. And what he does, which is very difficult for the loser, is he gives the loser every chance to remedy himself and to put forth his case. And then he comes down power against them. And so let's see if this Associated Newspapers case is going to be appealed.
I mean, I know Harry's hinting at that, but there's just no chance. There is no chance. Lady C,
if they appeal, I don't think it's gonna succeed. No. But you never know what these idiots
just financially, there's just no way. There's no way they can take the risk. Lady C, I just want to show you. Piers Morgan also weighed in on the whole Princess Diana side of it, so I wanted to get you to respond. Watch this.
Diana used to call me regularly. I used to go around for lunch at Kensington Palace. She'd call me. I'd tape the calls, and she knew I was taping her. I'd send her the copy of the story I was going to run. She would send it back with little amendments. I've got all this, right? So this idea that Prince Harry seems to want the public to buy into, that every story about him and his family has been gained illegally by terrible journalists, it's just not true.
Well, it's been knocked out. Every single article was legitimately sourced, is Justice Nickling's findings.
Is Piers right there, Lady C?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Diana was the greatest manipulator of all, I mean, she actually wrote Andrew Morton's book for him. She actually wrote Princess in Love, which was the Anna Pasternak, James Hewitt book. It was written off her letters to James Hewitt. And at the time, the book was criticized for being overblown and Mills and Boon. It was Diana's words, word for word. My first Diana book started out as an authorized biography to raise money for 3 of her charities, which were 3 of my charities. And in 1990, it might have been 1989, but I think it was 1990, after we had spoken about it, I went into the palace, gratis her arrangements to have things done officially. And then the whole arrangement changed because she wanted out of the royal system. And she thought that my book would be her get out of jail card. And when she started to tell too many lies to me about Charles, which I could check anything that she told me, and she was naive enough to think that even though she used to say, you know both sides of it, because I did, because my boyfriend at the time, James Buchanan Jardine, was his cousin. One of his cousins was married to Maggie Glamis, who subsequently became the Earl of Strathmore. So I had, on both sides of the fence, I had impeccable connections, and she used to try to milk me for information about what was going on up at Glamis, because Issa and Catherine Weatherall were married to Maggie Glamis and Nicholas Soames. And Nick Soames was, whose sister Fiona was an old friend of mine. I went to her 21st birthday party. Nick Soames was, everybody knew, was Charles's good friend as well. And Diana knew all of this. So I had access to people that Diana didn't have access to. Equally, I had access through Diana to people that Charles Camp didn't have access to. And so I had a very comprehensive view of what was going on. And when I came to the conclusion that I could not honorably write the book that Dan and I had effectively started out writing, because she was telling too many lies about Charles and what a victim she was. But the mistake she'd made was she came clean initially. She said that, you know, basically the marriage was never going to be able to work because they were hopelessly mismatched. What she didn't say was that she had deceived Charles into thinking she was a country-loving, very amenable girl. And once the wedding ring was on the finger, he discovered she was a metropolitan who didn't like the country. And also she was extremely dominant. He didn't understand how dominating she was until the wedding ring was on the finger. So, but she was pretty frank about all of it. Until I don't know whether she went home and spoke to one of her crazy, stupid friends, because she had some really stupid friends, or she simply decided herself. But I always thought she'd spoken to someone who said, you know, Diana, you can't say that you're so miserable that you want out because you don't like royal restrictions and you want freedom, because all those factory workers in Dagenham who love you are going to loathe you, because they still have to go into the office every day and they have to work. And so that's when she came up with being the victim. But she didn't come up with being the victim initially. And so there was all of that going on. And Harry has no concept of the nuances. And Diana played the press brilliantly. And they were very collusive with her. I'm not knocking Paul Dacre and Sir David English and Richard Kay for having jumped on that bandwagon. I mean, good for them, you know. But the fact of the matter is, they were not even-handed, and they were not as even-handed as they should have been. I was even-handed, and I paid the price, both from the press and from other people as well, because people may have forgotten it, but initially I was abused roundly for the positions I took.
Absolutely. Oh, Lady C, what fascinating insight. For so much more of it, make sure you subscribe to